Gentlemen, in a previous video I talked about the 5 pillars to become a gentleman, and one of those, the 5th pillar, is the spiritual pillar. This is the thing that anchors you outside of yourself. And I'm here at the Westminster Abbey in Mission, British Columbia, putting my money where my mouth is. There goes the bells. That was very interesting. Apparently that's a bell training class. I never thought there was any theory involved with it, but apparently there is. So as I was saying, the 5 pillars of being a gentleman. The 5th one is the spiritual. And I like to use an analogy of a vessel. You see, a vessel, the ship, needs an anchor, right? And the anchor is something that sits outside of the ship itself. You drop the anchor and it keeps you safe in harbor. It keeps you from floating out to sea aimlessly. It's something that is grounding outside of yourself. Because if the ship didn't have some sort of an anchor, well, when seas got rough, they would just go floating out with the tides and the currents. So but anyway, so we're here for a weekend men's retreat to discuss such things. It's apparently bears. Anyway, so we were discussing Luke last night, and Luke chapter 2 about the birth of Jesus. And what came up was Joseph and the role that he played as a father to Jesus. And the interesting thing here is that Joseph is a fairly important character, I would say, in that he was the father of Jesus and raised him, but he's not very present in the Bible. There's discussions about him, of course, that say the things that he did and didn't do, but he's not quoted anywhere, and his lack of presence actually speaks volumes about fatherhood and what it means to be a man and to be a gentleman. I just had to stop for this here. Check it out. I've seen some big rhododendrons, but I've never seen one the size of a small apartment. Holy crap. Wild. And just in case you don't know, here's the Cliff Notes version of the story. So, Caesar Augustus, he was the emperor of Rome at the time. He wanted to do a census, likely for tax purposes, because why else would the government want to know how many people are around? And everyone went to their small towns, the nearest towns, to go get counted. Among them, of course, was Joseph and Mary, and they end up in Bethlehem. There's no room at the inn. They stay in the inn. Jesus is born in a manger. Christmas, okay? And the thing that is most interesting here is that the Bible records things that were notable, right? I mean, you can't record everything. And Joseph isn't really in the story all that much. So, does that imply either A, that Joseph was insignificant, or B, that there's something else going on? I think B. And just before we get too started, we have to think about these biblical narratives in a couple of different ways. We have to think about it first in the historical context and then the application of the lesson to be learned. So, the historical context is this. Joseph was of a royal lineage. He's from King David, and he is a lowly carpenter, so to speak, a very humble craft. This would be a matter of public record, right? Everyone would know that Joseph was of a royal lineage. It doesn't make sense then that he would be insignificant. My guess is that it is a matter of discretion, and that to talk about Joseph would be to take away from the discussion about Jesus. Maybe. At least that's my interpretation. But I think we can glean more looking at it as the lesson applies. So the fact that Joseph is relatively excluded from the overall biblical narrative, despite the outsized impact that he likely had on Jesus' life, tells us something in modern day. It tells us, men, to be focused on duty, despite your relative the humble position that you may have in society. You may be a carpenter, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can still have an outsized impact on those around you, and by extension, have an outsized impact on the world. So I think there's a great deal there to be learned about being a gentleman and not flouting your lineage, not flouting your education, but instead putting your head down, doing the work, focusing on the duty of being a man and being a father, and that's that. Anyway, I love these foggy, rainy days. Anyway, go build your faith, build your family, and build something bigger than yourself. See you next time.